my friends. Thank you for clicking on episode 18 in my series of stories of survival. Survival not only of myself, but survival of my mental health and survival of my terrible choices and survival of drugs and survival of death. Because death, or at the very least the threat of it, is going to be an ongoing, continual theme in these next few stories I'm going to tell. So before I start this story, I just want to make one thing abundantly clear, because I don't think I've ever really explained this up to this point. I truly believe that I was a born-again believer in Jesus Christ the entire time I was flushing my life down the toilet. I am completely confident that I gave my life to Jesus when I was 6. I know this seems impossible considering all that I've told you up to this point, but I remember clearly the agony, the shame, and the guilt I was experiencing deep within my soul. I remember how badly I wanted to stop living this life of sin, but I was just in so deep. And besides, just because somebody obeys the call of Jesus in their heart and bows the knee to his lordship doesn't mean they stop sinning. Followers of Jesus will never stop sinning on this side of heaven. The reprobate and the converted alike are capable of horrific sins. For me, I was as addicted to the relief I was experiencing in my messed up brain as I was to the drugs themselves. I never wanted to go back to how I used to feel as a kid, and especially during my military days. But however, as I've said in other stories, I always sought to silence my accusing conscience by doing more drugs. Thing is, rarely did I ever tune it out. It just kind of became like this faint buzzing deep in my mind. It never fully went away. And another important detail that I usually include when I tell my stories of Denver is that my mom, she played a huge role in eventually getting me home. When I was younger, she was committed, like a warrior, to getting scripture into her children's memory. We, as in myself and my 3 younger sisters, we were all required to memorize many Bible verses. Those verses that she taught me from when I was young, they were constantly invading my darkened, drugged out mind. Some nights I just had this hard time going to sleep, which is usually due to the meth. So I would just lie awake in the dead of the night, just staring at the darkness and just endure this onslaught of God's word convicting me of my vile, terrible, sinful lifestyle. It was just, I was already crazy as it was in the mental health, but now I've got this guilt. Oh, goodness. No wonder I did so many drugs. The verses my mom diligently taught me, these same verses, they were preparing my mind to come home. It was just only a matter of time. So I left off at the last story referencing a new door. I know I've overplayed the opening door analogy ad infinitum, but the idea of it works so well, okay? That's why I keep going to it. So as the second half of January 2000 was beginning, Mark and I were basically at a crossroads at this point. As a regular mean drunk, he was beyond tough to be around. He was just awful. But now that he was a total tweaker from all the meth he was doing, he was becoming dangerous. His screwed up, twisted brain began concocting these strategies to turn me in should he ever get arrested again. Like any normal person, he never wanted to go back to prison. So he was putting together a log of all the times I bought meth in hopes that he could somehow sell this information to the cops to get him out of trouble. He was also becoming strangely jealous of all the time that I spent with April. I don't know if he felt like I was betraying our friendship, but he was definitely getting weird and kind of clingy. The whole thing just felt very awkward and off. He was becoming obsessive and possessive, really, because over the time, the couple of years that we've known each other, we've had plenty of deep, heart-to-heart conversations. He has definitely cried more than once in front of me because his mind was just so broken and messed up. He just felt comfortable telling me his darkest secrets. It hurt my heart to see Mark turning into this monster. He was just a sensitive and gentle, giving dude, but now he had fully given control over to his Mr. Hyde self. Many nights were spent with him and I yelling at each other. I really don't know why the cops were never called, because our arguments were getting loud and heated. Eventually he'd tire himself out and go into his room. We shared the same wall, so I would just kind of hear him, mumbling and talking loudly to himself as he paces around that he was going to turn me into the cops or he was going to beat me up. He was always challenging me to a fight for some reason, but I never gave in. I was just like, dude, no, I'm not fighting you. Stop. And this would carry on, his mumbling to himself, I'm saying in the other room. This would carry on until he would just suddenly stop and his room would fall kind of deathly silent. The next morning, I'd open my door and kind of look in his room to see him face down on his bedroom carpet, just kind of laying there, and usually one of his disgusting empty plastic vodka jugs nearby. I mean, the dude looked like a hobo minus the gutter. I'm telling April about all that's going on. I'm getting very uneasy about living with this psycho any longer. I truly was waiting for him to kill me in my sleep. April still lived at home at this point, and I've been over there. I've had dinner with her parents many times. These were some incredible people. I loved them dearly. They knew their daughter was messed up and that she was always running around with these just terrible guys, but for some reason, they felt comfortable with her hanging out with me. They knew. They absolutely fully suspected that we were doing drugs on a regular basis, but I think they just seemed to believe that maybe I could pull her away from this evil and she'd settle down. I don't know why they thought that. I gave them no reason to think that. But because, you see, April is very intelligent. She's very gifted. She just made these terrible choices, especially the men that she hung out with. Go figure, right? So anyway, now I'm telling her about all these terrible conversations with Mark, and we're talking through our options, and she suggested maybe that I should move in with her and her parents until I could get my own place. I was not down with this at all because I felt like a big enough a loser as it was. I did not want to move in with her and her parents. But problem was, I really had no other options. I didn't have anybody else I could live with, and I certainly could afford a place on my own. So I just kept telling her it'd all get figured out eventually. Well, God caused eventually to happen right around the end of January. It's typical night with Mark. He's harassing me, goading me, trying to get me to fight him. Obviously, he's beyond wasted, 3 sheets to the wind at this point. Finally, I'm like, I've had enough. Hands up, whatever. I go to my room. I tell him to go to his. Sleep it off, dude. Yeah, I'm sick of you. In the past, this usually worked because, like a child, if I wasn't giving him the satisfaction of arguing back, he'd grow bored and go do his own thing. But for some reason, this night, Mark decided tonight was the night we were to go to blows. He's banging on my locked bedroom door. He's demanding I come out and fight him like a man. And if I didn't come out and fight him right now, he was going to kill me in my sleep. He then tells me that he's been planning on killing me for quite a while now, and that he actually has a specific kitchen knife that he's been hiding under his mattress. Oh my goodness. This is the first time he's ever threatened to kill me, and obviously I am so freaked out at this point. He's still violently banging on my door, kicking it, screaming at the top of his lungs. I tell him, like, dude, shut up. The neighbor's going to call the cops. I'm like, we got all these drugs on our coffee table. He's like, those aren't my drugs. Those are your drugs, and I have proof they're yours. What? He's like, if you don't come out and fight me right now, I'm going to keep banging on this door until the cops show up, and I'm going to turn you in. At this point, it's after midnight. It's a weekday. These cops are going to show up any minute. He's about to get his wish. I could just tell it. But then something strange happens. He stops, and the apartment just suddenly goes silent. I remember that so vividly, that silence. It was so weird. I'm fearing it's a trick. So I'm just kind of like hanging out in my room for about, I don't know, half hour, 20 minutes, somewhere. It was a while. Wanted to see if he'd come back banging. But yet, in that time, there was never a peep out of him again. Eventually, I hear him snoring right outside my door. So I kind of slowly open my bedroom door, and I see him face down, sprawled out in front of my door, just gone. And I look at my door, there's a big old hole in it from him banging on it. I don't know if it was the drugs and the screaming and the cheap vodka, but he passed out like all the blood had left his brain. So I step over his snoring body, and I tiptoe through the apartment, picking up all the drugs and their corresponding paraphernalia, and slap them in my pocket, and I get out of there. I get in my car, and I drive around for the rest of the night. I'm listening to music, trying to, whatever. Obviously, I'm not falling asleep because I am all tweaked out myself. Obviously, April, her and her family are asleep at this point, so I had nowhere to go, and I most definitely wasn't going back to my apartment. Morning finally breaks, and I knew everybody would be up at April's house, so I give her a call. I tell her what happened. She's like, all right, there's no way you're going back to your apartment. You have no choice. You're moving in with me and my family. I had no other options. She was right. I had to, nowhere else to go. So her dad worked at Home Depot, and her mom worked for the optometrist. She was like a receptionist there. And like I said, April's really intelligent. She knew exactly when and how to approach her mom at work and tell her everything that happened and to ask if I could move in. I've said this before. Her parents are just the most amazing people. God used them to keep me alive long enough to get me back home. So here we are. We're in the optometrist. She tells her mom the whole story. And as far as her mom's concerned, fine, you can move in. But, being a good wife, she wants to talk to her husband because her husband lives there too. And he needs to wait till his lunch break and ask him. She calls and says, of course, no problem. Then he also even agreed to help me move all my stuff out after he was done working. April's dad, let me just tell you, is a fiery, not to be messed with dude. He was not worried one bit about dealing with Mark. So, true to his word, after work, her dad and I, we went over there and ready to go grab all my stuff. The whole way there, I'm so nervous that once we get there, all hell's going to break loose. But when we pull out of the parking lot, I noticed that, Mark's little junky car is not in the parking lot. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be easier than I expected. I don't know where he went, but he never came home the entire time that I was moving all my stuff out of the apartment. And when I say my stuff, I pretty much owned everything in that apartment. Only thing that Mark owned was what was ever in his room and his little computer that was sitting on my kitchen table in the kitchen. Okay. So I knew that, eventually I'm probably going to get my own place. I don't want to start all over again. I have to get all this new furniture. So I just took everything with me. I cleaned out the entire place. When we left, all that was in that place was Mark's stuff and his computer sitting all lonely on the kitchen floor all by itself. And fortunately, sadly, I had to leave my ferret behind. But, it wasn't really that big of a deal because at this point, that ferret was Mark's anyway. Later, I can't imagine what it was like. And Mark came home to a huge surprise, empty apartment, his dog and a ferret, and that was it. However, this is not the end of the Mark saga. Even though I was not living with him still in this apartment, it did not stop him from regularly harassing April and I. I will tell his fate probably in the next story because Mark, he was not going down without swinging. So now, I'm living with April. I'm living in their home. I'm throwing $200 towards the mortgage, and I'm still trying to save up to move out. I'm telling you right now, I only moved out when I moved back home to New York 8 months later. In those last 8 months that I'm in Denver, all restraints were removed. I fully embraced the kind of twisted, jacked up lifestyle that very few people ever experience, let alone survive. I don't know how, but I just found a way to be even more debauched. We'll just say that. The back of my mind, though, I knew the clock was ticking. I knew that Denver was coming to a close. But however, like Mark, I wasn't going home without putting up a fight. I was completely and totally hypnotized by the life I was living with April. As I made abundantly clear, there was something very powerful and very evil pulling all the levers and the strings in the background. It never ceases to amaze me how all-consuming my time with April was. When I did finally leave, what was feverishly trying to keep me there pulled out all the stops. I barely survived. I was forever trying to frustrate God's plan of rescuing me, but every attempt failed. It was like they had these multiple personality thing going on. I said in other stories, I wanted to go home. I was sick of the life I was living, but this other side was like, I don't want to leave this. I'm having too much fun. I was hypnotized, like I said. But eventually, I don't remember what point, maybe April, somewhere in April or May, I'm trying to say the month, I just kind of quietly accepted defeat. But you know what? I decided I was going to live like there was no tomorrow. And only by the grace of God did I experience every tomorrow in those final 8 months. Because death, or at the very least imprisonment, it was constantly snapping at my heels. So that's it for this one. Thank you. The next one, I'm gonna put a capper on Mark. And as I always do with these stories, I want to put a capper on this one. And I want to just want to tell you, okay? As I said in the beginning, this was my sin, okay? I was not blaming my choices. I was not blaming my sin on my upbringing. I was not blaming my sin on my parents or the environment I was living in. Those excuses, they do not help anyone because they give an out for people, and it stops people from motivating them to deal with the problems that are really there. They're bad choices. Why are they making these bad choices? Yes, part of me was that I was dealing with mental health. I was dealing with undealt with mental health. I was ignoring it. I truly really didn't have a title for it yet. I just knew there was something wrong in my brain. If I just put a little effort into talking to somebody, because believe me, I have talked to many pastors and people that cared about me as a teen and everything else. I had no problem telling people what was going on in my mind, but I was stubborn. I wanted to keep living this fast-paced lifestyle I was living, so I was ignoring it. And all the while, I was adding bad choice upon bad choice upon bad choice. And to this day, I carry so much baggage. I deal with nightmares and dreams, and I'm forever haunted by the ghosts of my past. I should have dealt with this a lot sooner. And I am encouraging those who are watching this, who are dealing with mental health and who are dealing with the mental health poorly, as I did. You need to stop. You're doing yourself a world of hurt. You're adding more problems to your situation. I don't know how else to say it, but I do know this. I do know this answer because I always say this every time. The one who does know how to help you perfectly is Jesus, and Jesus is waiting to give you that help. We all need to accept that we are born into this world automatically combatants with God, enemies of God, because we are born with sin. That sin is separating us from God. God cannot look upon sin. I'm going to touch on that whole thing a little bit more in a different story because I got a whole thing I want to do. I want to explain that deeper. But until then, okay, Scripture says that today is the day of salvation. If you're watching this, you don't know what I'm going on about this whole sin, being born with sin. How is this my fault if I'm born with sin? And how am I responsible to what God tells me I need to do? Go to my website. There are links explaining what God expects from all of us, what he expects for us to do with his son, Jesus Christ, and what Jesus Christ has done for us on our behalf. Go check it out. While you're there, if you want to send me a message, please, I welcome it. Send me a message. Ask me to pray for you. Tell me what's going on. I will listen. I will respond, and I will pray for you. Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. Oh, and I'll keep getting off my chest. You know that by now at the end of all these stories. Come back. See what happens with Mark. See what I get myself into now in these final 8 months. Till then, keep pressing on, my friends.